President Obama briefed the leaders of Congress today on the options he's considering to deal with the crisis in Iraq. The White House says all options are open except combat troops. The Iraqi government is asking for the U.S. to airstrike in its battle against Sunni militants. The president has made no decision on that, but a U.S. military operation in Iraq is underway in the sky. David Martin at the Pentagon begins our coverage.
U.S. military aircraft, including warplanes from the USS Bush, are now flying round-the-clock surveillance missions over Iraq. At the same time, Joint Chiefs Chairman General Martin Dempsey told Congress Iraq has indeed asked for airstrikes against the insurgents who now control much of northern and western Iraq.
We have a request from the Iraqi government for air power.
You do?
We do.
But airstrikes have been put on hold, in part due to a lack of good enough intelligence to target insurgents without harming friendly Iraqi troops or innocent civilians.
These forces are very much intermingled. It's not as easy as looking at an iPhone video of a convoy and then immediately striking it.
To get better intelligence, the Pentagon is now planning to send about 100 Army Green Berets into Iraq to serve as American eyes and ears on the ground.
The president has promised not to send U.S. troops back into combat in Iraq, so those Green Berets would not go into battle alongside Iraqi troops. But they would be armed, and as one military officer put it, there will be risk. Sharon?
All right, thank you, David Martin at the Pentagon tonight.
Today, armed American drones flew over Baghdad to protect U.S. troops sent by President Obama to assess Iraq's desperate situation. Islamic extremists have seized large sections of the north in a fight to establish a strict Islamic state in Iraq and Syria. They're threatening to attack Baghdad. We have two reports. First, David Martin at the Pentagon. David?
Scott, now that American advisors are in Baghdad, they're joining up with Iraqi army units defending the city, and that could potentially expose them to combat.
So the Pentagon has begun flying Predator drones armed with Hellfire missiles over Baghdad to provide air cover for the American advisors. Other aircraft, from high-flying Global Hawk drones to F-18 fighter jets, are flying about 30 reconnaissance missions a day over western and northern Iraq. But the armed drones are there to provide backup for the advisors. Under the command of Major General Dana Petard, the advisors' primary mission is to determine whether the Iraqi army can defend the capital. Insurgent fighters numbering in the thousands are moving toward Baghdad from both the north and the west, positioning themselves for what U.S. intelligence calls a multi-pronged assault, although there is no indication yet they have actually made the decision to attack. The Iraqi army has deployed units across the most likely avenues of approach, and U.S. intelligence believes these units can successfully defend Baghdad. But officials admit they were caught by surprise earlier this month when 4 divisions defending the northern city of Mosul broke and ran.
If the president decides to launch airstrikes, those same American advisors could end up directing the strikes onto specific targets.
David Martin at the Pentagon. David, thank you.
Of helicopters and drone aircraft will be sent to Iraq. Pentagon spokesman Rear Admiral John Kirby said about 200 troops had already arrived in Iraq to reinforce security at the U.S. Embassy and Baghdad International Airport. He added that U.S. President Barack Obama has authorized the establishment of 2 Joint Operations Center and an assessment of how the U.S. can provide additional support to Iraq's security forces.
Vice President, let me start with this. This is from one item in the Washington Post posted by Paul Waldman today. Quote, "There is not a single person in America who has been more wrong and more shamelessly dishonest on the topic of Iraq than Dick Cheney. And now as the cascade of misery and death and chaos he did so much to unleash rages anew, Mr. Cheney has the unadulterated gall to come before the country and tell us that it's all someone else's fault. The suggestion then is that you caused this mess, Mr. Vice President. What say you?"
Well, obviously, I disagree. I think we went into Iraq for very good reasons. I think when we left office, we had a situation in Iraq that was very positive. We made major progress as a result of the decision President Bush made to go with a surge in 07 and 08. There had been a dramatic reduction in violence in the country. They were prepared for negotiations that would lead to a stay-behind force of American trainers, technical people, intelligence, logistics capability, so that the Iraqi armed forces would be able to defend their own territory. What happened was that Barack Obama came to office, and instead of negotiating a stay-behind agreement, he basically walked away from it. Not only did the combat forces leave, but all of the other forces left as well. Our generals had recommended a level of 20,000 to stay behind. The White House said no and cut it ultimately to 3,000, and frankly that was inadequate to do the job. No agreement was ever reached, but the result was an Iraqi military that was unable to stand up to the terrorists when the ISIS came in from Syria a few days ago.
In your op-ed you write as follows: rarely has a U.S. president been so wrong about so much at the expense of so many. But time and time again, history has proven that you got it wrong as well in Iraq, sir. You said there was no doubt Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. You said we would be greeted as liberators. You said the Iraq insurgency was in the last throes back in 2005. And you said that after our intervention, extremists would have to, quote, rethink their strategy of jihad. Now, with almost $1 trillion spent there, with 4,500 American lives lost there, what do you say to those who say you were so wrong about so much at the expense of so many?
No, I just fundamentally disagree, Megan. You've got to go back and look at the track record. We inherited a situation where there was no doubt in anybody's mind about the extent of Saddam's involvement in weapons of mass destruction. We had a situation where after 9/11, we were concerned about a follow-on attack that would involve not just airline tickets and box cutters as the weapons, but rather something far deadlier, perhaps even a nuclear weapon. Saddam Hussein had a track record that nearly everybody agreed to. We had an overwhelming vote of approval from the Congress, more votes for the action than we'd had in Desert Storm some 10 years before. Bill Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, numerous others spoke to the difficulties of the intelligence that all of us saw with respect to the threat that Saddam Hussein represented. It would have been irresponsible for us not to act. We did do the right thing, and I think the troops performed magnificently, and now we're in a situation where what Liz and I posted in our op-ed this morning is it's not just Iraq, but it's a whole pattern of behavior over the last 6 years that has refused to recognize that there is a war on terror, that we've got to move very aggressively to be able to deal with that, and this administration has repeatedly demonstrated that they don't believe it. Barack Obama has stated repeatedly the terrorist threat's gone, we got bin Laden. That's clearly not the case. That's not the truth. And in fact, we have a situation tonight where terrorism is potentially in charge of a larger part of the Middle East than ever before in our history.
You mentioned that the status of forces agreement, and President Obama's taken a lot of heat for not negotiating that with Maliki. However, critics point out that it was President Bush who did sign the deal that said we'd get all U.S. forces out of there by the end of 2011.
With a status forces agreement for a stay-behind force.
And when our current president sought to renegotiate that, al-Maliki didn't want it. That's what the president's defenders say, that he wanted to keep some stay-behind forces that would protect the gains our troops had made, but Maliki made it too tough.
No, that's not quite accurate, Megan. What happened was our generals recommended a stay-behind force from 14 to 18,000. The White House rejected it. So the military came back with a recommendation of 10,000. The White House rejected it. They took it all the way down to 3,000. I think by the time they got to the level, the Iraqis looked at it and believed that we weren't serious, that Obama was absolutely committed to completely withdraw from Iraq, and they were unable to come to an agreement, but I think in part because the Iraqis didn't think he really wanted one, and he certainly didn't push it. We have agreements like that with 40 nations around the world. They should have been able to come to an agreement with the Iraqis, and I think that failure to do so is what has precipitated the current crisis.
You know, there's no question.
It's a culmination of a policy that's gone on for 6 years now, and he has not been willing to step forward and have the United States play a significant role in the world.
Well, I want to ask you about that, because despite the fact that the Iraq war was so controversial in some of the items, in part because of the things we've been discussing, when the president came into office, President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden came into office, the vice president was celebratory about the situation in Iraq and said that it may be one of their greatest successes. That's how he described it in 2010, that Iraq could be one of the Obama administration's greatest successes, he predicted. Do you think, let me give this one to you, Liz, do you think that that is a game changer in terms of the political way this is playing out from all the people who want to blame the Cheneys and the Bushes?
Well, I think that what it demonstrates, Megan, is that there was agreement, there was unanimity when the president came into office that, in fact, Iraq was in a stable situation, that, in fact, the surge had been successful. President Obama also said, as a candidate in 2008, that the surge succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. So there's no question but that the situation was one where the president had a job, which was to negotiate a stay-behind agreement, to leave enough forces there so that we could provide the kind of intelligence the Iraqis needed, the kind of training they needed, the kind of assistance and support and planning that they needed to be able to maintain the gains that had been so hard-won by American forces.
He wanted
President
it, he wanted
didn't
out.
do that.
He wanted
now,
out.
Yeah, and there's no surprise, frankly, that there are a lot of people now who would like to say, well, let's blame, the Bush-Cheney administration for what happened. That's a pretty routine thing we hear from this administration. But your questions tonight, Megan, in large part demonstrate why we've decided to form this organization, the Alliance for a Strong America, because there's a lot out there that's being said, frankly, that is not true from this administration about the threat facing our country today. And we feel it's very important that people understand the threat that we face.
And I want to give you a chance to respond to that. I mean, obviously, these are questions that are out there and that are being raised, and who better to respond to them than you? And I know that now you formed this group, and your group wants to reverse President Obama's policies, which I know you, Mr. Vice President, believe have endangered America's security. First, tell us why you think that, and tell us how you think, this nonprofit group can do anything to stop a president.
Well, for one thing, Megan, we think it's an opportunity to get out and talk about these issues in a very objective fashion, to stand up and point out the flaws in the administration's current effort. Liz and I had the opportunity back in March to make a swing through the Middle East and talk to people I've been dealing with for 25 years, since Desert Storm. And to a person, whether we're in Israel or in Egypt or the Peninsula Arab states, to a person they now doubt the willingness of the Americans to come to their assistance. They don't trust us anymore. They were all very fearful that this president will not keep his word. And for years they've been our partners and our allies, and now they believe basically that they can no longer count on that. They see the administration they think is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, the group from which Al-Qaeda and Egyptian Islamic Jihad and so many others were spin-offs. And tonight, if you look at the possibility, for example, that Barack Obama wants to work with the Iranians to get involved in Iraq, that's something that creates consternation and fear among all of our friends and allies in that part of the world who think Iran is as big an enemy as Al-Qaeda.
Do you think that President Obama is dangerous?
Yes, I'll answer that one, Megan. I think there's no question. I think that he is unique in terms of a president who is sitting in the Oval Office, who has made very clear that his desire is to weaken the nation. And whether you say it's his intent, whether it's naivete, you can now look at the results of the policy the last 6.5 years, and you've got, the black-clad terrorists of ISIS now taking over city after city after city in Iraq.
Flying
You've got
flags.
Al-Qaeda, 58% more Al-Qaeda, more Salafist jihadist groups now across the globe than we had in 2010. There's no question but that he's a dangerous president, and that we've got to fight back, and that we've got to ensure that people understand the importance of American power in securing our freedom and security.
I have to leave it at that because I'm out of time.
Megan,
But I'll give you a quick last word, Mr. Vice President.
Last word, in the last 4 years, there has been a 58% increase in the number of jihadist groups around the world. That's according to a RAND Corporation study, came out 2 weeks ago. There's a dramatic increase in terrorism, a dramatic increase in their capability, and a president who refuses to recognize that there is such a thing as a war on terror.
Thank you both so much.
A new message posted on the internet from what's believed to be the Islamist group ISIL. In this audio recording, the militant group has taken over a large swathe of Iraq and parts of Syria, says it's established a caliphate or an Islamic state. Reuters can't independently confirm the content of the video, but here the flag of ISIL can be clearly identified. In another part of the video, militants can be seen literally bulldozing what's believed to be the Syria-Iraqi border. The group says its flag flies from Aleppo in northern Syria to Diyala province in eastern Iraq. In the recording, ISIL says it's renamed itself the Islamist State and proclaimed this man, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, seen here in a US Department Wanted poster, as its leader. An alleged spokesperson for the organization says he'll be known as Caliph Ibrahim and that he's also the leader for Muslims everywhere. Gulf Arab states such as Saudi Arabia are likely to be alarmed by this open declaration that could pose a challenge to their leadership and power.
You're cleared hot to blow up the blue bongo, over.
And you're clear whenever you're ready. Get line of sight. There you go. You're in zoom already. And whenever you're ready, you're clear. Sorry. Roger. Away. Good impact. Good impact. Target destroyed. Roger. Rolling. advise so we can get them away from population area. Over. What are you guys seeing around there? Is it not really close? I'm just cross-checking now and then. Is it really close to affected population?
What's the approximate distance to the nearest collide? Over.
Roger, closest collide is a 200 meters. If you catch them in the middle of that, shouldn't be any collateral. I don't think we're going to have any collateral if we go along the road. We're observing them walking farther away from all collateral damage. Roger, give me a good estimate on distance from that bigger group of collides. They're about 200 meters from a collide. Right now we see nearest collide 200 meters. At least, probably more than that. We are now 200 meters from the closest collides, still staying in a tight group with their weapons, requesting the clearance fires. Over. We are clear to engage. Over. We'll follow that road inbound to reduce collateral damage. Be advised, we're going to get set up on a good inbound run to completely eliminate any collateral damage. Clear fire. Pause and gun, and fired. Shoot again. One more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys. 2 guys running down the water. Clear fire. Clear fire. We're engaging.
If you can identify the fingers going to on the south side of that spur, counting from the first rocky finger, go 2 more back and it should be in that location. That